And we're on.
All right, good afternoon and welcome to the House Environment and Energy Committee. We are going to take up S-213, the flood safety bill from Senate, and we're first going to hear from Green Mountain Power.
Thank you. Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Josh Castlegate with Green Mountain Power, President, Chief Innovation Officer there. So one of the areas that I oversee is our generation fleet, which includes our hydro, all of our dams. And I just plan to quickly talk about what we operate for dams here in Vermont, kind of the dam safety aspect of the bill, and and then take any questions. So GMP currently has just 51 dams, between most of those being in Vermont, a few of those in New Hampshire. 43 of those dams are regulated by the FERC, so don't really pertain to the bill in question here, but the FERC regulates, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission regulates how the dam safety inspection process works, the plans and procedures and public safety stuff that we do around those facilities. And then we have eight dams located in a few different parts of Vermont that are currently under the Public Utility Commission for us. So those are dams like Marshfield Dam, Chittenden Dam down outside of Rutland, Chittenden, and a few other smaller dams. Those I believe you have the list there, and they're a mix of hazard classifications. So currently those dams, those eight are regulated by the Public Utility Commission. If we go to, we do our safety work, our safety inspections on those dams. So we follow the PUC rules for those, but we basically do them the same way to the strict standard that we do with our FERC facilities. The classification, I don't know if I think Mr. Green was in here, probably talked about the different classifications of dams. There's low hazard, which are, you'd expect if something were to happen to the dam, it's a low impact, significant, and high hazard, which is just how they classify the impact if something were to happen from one of these facilities. Those classifications dictate what you need to do for inspections, what you need for emergency action plans, and that's all defined. It's defined by the FERC for the FERC dams. PUC has a rule for the PUC, Public Utilities Commission dams that we manage, and then the DEC also has a set of rules for their dam safety. We put together a simple little chart, and you've probably seen something similar around the different regulatory bodies and what the inspection routines are for the different dams. With the top being the FERC, which again is most of our dams, and we follow the FERC inspection process, which is a mix of inspections on annual bases, 5-year, 10-year, depending on the level of detail. And we operated with a team of folks who are at our dams on a daily, every other day basis as well, inspecting those. And the PUC, Public Utility Commission rule, has a similar set of inspection guidelines, standards. The only other thing I wanted to hit was just to talk a little bit about not only obviously the dams that GMP operates are generating electricity. A lot of these dams have been running for quite some time, producing hydropower for us, but they are leveraged. They do provide a benefit during flooding conditions, which I think sometimes can get lost in this. So, when we're operating our facilities, first and foremost is the safety of the dam, of the infrastructure around it, the public, and our team. And then once that is established, and we can leverage the dam for flood control, for example. So this past July, obviously everyone's aware of the significant flooding event, precip event that we had here. So some of the things we do leading up to those is a lot of just forecasting, just like we do for storms, what we're expecting for precipitation, and that then informs us what we do to manage water in the facility behind the dam. We can make more room, for example, as we know there's going to be more precip coming. And this summer, as an example, so Marshfield is essentially the start for the most part of the Winooski River. Feeds into the very top near the headwaters of the Winooski River. During the peak of the flooding event, we were able to leverage Marshfield to hold back essentially half of what was coming in. So imagine, in this case, it was 2,400 CFS, which stands for cubic feet per second, just how much water is flowing into the facility. And at the peak, we let out 1,000. So there's 2,400 coming in, 1,000 going out. That meant half of that, or about 1,400, was staying behind in the dam. If you picture the dam's not there, then the full 2,400 CFS is just adding to the conditions in the river downstream. So it's just an example of just, to make sure folks are aware that there is a benefit for some of the facilities when it comes to managing. Again, our first operation is to make sure the dam is safe and the operations are safe. And then second, if we're able to leverage it to manage flows like that, we continue to do that. I think those were kind of the highlights I planned ahead, so we to take questions.
Sure, thanks for your testimony. So do you support the bill?
Yeah, so on I think the piece that we're focused on is the change of regulation from PUC to DEC. Essentially, we don't have an issue. We've been agnostic to that, which regulatory body ultimately oversees it. We're going to continue to operate the high level of safety that we do today. So we don't have a concern with that change.
Yeah, thanks for your testimony, Josh. The scenario you were just talking about with the flooding. So who's coordinating that? Is that emergency management that's coordinating the releases with you all?
When it comes to our own facilities, it's us. So it's GMP managing our facilities. Different than, like, say, the Townsend Dam or the Ball or Wrightsville that the state operations may decide on. When it comes to running our dams, we're coordinating. We're in communication with the state and, throughout these events, but we're determining the best way to manage the operation of the dam during these events.
Okay. And this shift from PUC to DEC would not change your operation during flooding?
Yeah, as far as I understand, one of the things that we're going to be, regardless of who regulates it, maintaining certain aspects of the dam in terms of being able to make room in the facility when there's floods coming, that we're going to want to make sure we maintain. That's a really important aspect of the safety of the dam. So if there were other, factors trying to change that, we would be really digging into that quite a bit. But so we would see us continuing to operate the dam safely. That's a key piece for us. Yeah.
Your question?
Yeah. Of the 8 dams that you have that are overseen by the PUC, what are the categories of those 8?
I actually put a list. So we've got 3 are high hazard, 1 is significant hazard. The remainder are low hazard. So 3 high, which again, East Pittsford, which is our Chittenden facility, Marshfield, and our Middlesex Dam.
Those 3 plus the 1, what are the conditions of those dams on the condition chart?
Like the condition of,
I forget what the terminology is for.
oh, how Mr. Green might have talked about them. Yeah, excellent, essentially. So because our dams may be a little bit different, they're all in excellent condition. So basically we're monitoring them and doing work on them every single day and all year. And, following, again, the PUC rules are sort of like the minimum that we do. We usually look at the FERC guidance and look to meet that across the dams anyway. And there's a continuous improvements happening at these facilities too, as there's more automation, as there's more, Marshfield, for example, over the years, things like camera installation to be able to visually see from our control room 24/7 and automated gates and a number of different things. So there's constant improvements as well.
Is it fair to say the FERC regulations are more stringent than the PUC?
I think so FERC and PUC are fairly similar. I would say those two are more stringent currently than DEC. So there's a DEC dam safety rule, which I'm not as familiar with, but we highlighted just the inspection periods. The PUC dam safety rule is the one that we follow, and that's a little bit more stringent on its full inspection periodical. I'm assuming there would be a rulemaking update process as part of this. I know that's in there. And the only thing we would say too, in terms of that transition, I believe the DEC has asked about just the timing of that. I mean, we would support making sure there's enough time for that transition to happen, so they were able to either get the resources, do what they needed to do to make sure there's no gap for us. We're going to continue to maintain the dam sort of regardless of which entity is overseeing it at similar to the FERC level, but yeah.
Are all your dams, like if you were having like a flood event, or you can manage the sort of amount you're generating with the grid need and like just not generate, even if you're still managing for a flood or even trying to release water?
Yeah, so you look at, when you have high precip event, a lot of different things go on at the ponding facilities, which is like a marsh field. You'll use the generator, the penstock to move water out of the dams. You can move water out of that dam a couple of ways, through the penstock, through the generator, through what's called the spillway, which has a gate. And those are essentially the ways. So you would control all of those things together, get the water level to where we determined it was the right point based on forecast for the precip coming in. And you manage all of those things together at the same time. And you can do that through an event, by controlling gates, generation, and a number of different things there.
And would you consider any of your hydro facilities base load?
Yeah. I mean, so we think of it in capacity factor, basically how much is it across the full year, and hydro runs from 50 to 70% is one way to think of it. So it's pretty base load. There's two types of hydro stations, run a river called, and then ponding. Run a river is exactly as it sounds. The river is flowing in and out, and it's just whatever's coming in is flowing out through the generator or over the dam. Ponding is where you can actually manage, you can peak, it's called. So like during high priced times, we can let a little more through the generator. But for the most part, I mean, as long as there's water, it's generating. It may not be at full output on a dry July day, but you're still generating something. And then as there's more water, you're generating more. But there's always some hydro running pretty much all the time.
At all of them?
I'm sorry?
At all of your dams?
Yeah. I mean, as things dry up in August, you might not have enough water for certain facilities, so they'll change throughout the year. But we have it's changed a little bit, but around 100 megawatts of hydro combined. So, you might be generating anywhere from 30 to 100 throughout the year, depending on how much water there is and what else is going on the system.
You know how many are ponded versus spillway?
I'd have to follow up with you on that. I do have that.
All right, any further questions? Thanks for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Jessica Luisos.
Nice. Just launching.
Welcome. Yes, introduce yourself for the record.
Sure. I am Jessica Luisos, and I am just going to make sure I'm connected here before I forget. I have some information I'm going to show up on the screen here. You don't need to see yourselves. Okay, so I am here with two different hats. My first hat is as a licensed professional engineer here in the state. I am a civil engineer. My title is a water resource engineer, which is sometimes called a river engineer. So most of my work is around rivers. I work on dams. I specialize in projects that have a geomorphology, river science component. A lot of that work that's not on dams is with river restoration, floodplain restoration. I work with a lot of communities on flood recovery and flood mitigation projects. So today I am here to focus on the dam part of my job, but there's other components of the bill that you're looking at that fall kind of within my work as well. So if you had questions on river corridors, I could also maybe chime in about that as well. My second hat that I'm here with today is through the American Society of Civil Engineers. Our group, professional engineering group, has put together a report. We have a published copy. The full report has been uploaded to your website. And I put together some summary slides to kind of walk through the pieces that are most important to the bill you're looking at here on dams. So this report was put together by 20 volunteer civil engineers from around the state, with the idea being that as the people who design, maintain, inspect different types of infrastructure, our society nationally has decided that it's important to then give back some of that information for people to be able to use for decision making. So our report has looked at multiple different types of infrastructure. Dams is just one of them. And we look at a whole variety of criteria, condition, capacity, funding, a lot of different things that go into our analysis. And then along with that, we then give a letter grade similar to a report card to each type of infrastructure. So Vermont's dams just last year in 23 received a C, which is mediocre. Essentially means that we need to be investing in our dams and our dam infrastructure to make sure that we're keeping up to speed and maintaining them in a safe situation.
Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
We're starting to understand the broad spectrum of different types of dams. How do you account for that if you're averaging them all together? I mean, a fish and wildlife dam with a C versus a hazard.
So it's a really good point. So it's an average of how we're doing across all of these different categories. Do we have rules in place that are having inspection schedules that are appropriate for the different types of hazard classes? Is there enough staff available to do those inspections and report and follow up on dams that have issues? So it's not only about the condition, because you're right. We just heard from a very proactive dam owner who is maintaining their particular dams in excellent condition, but that is not the case across, all of the dams in the state. So there is an average. Part of it is comparison to other states and where other states are at with staffing level, condition. Have there been a lot of failures? So it is kind of compared to how other states and nationally can we fit into that national piece. So
who's an A? Who's an A?
There are currently no states at an A in dams.
So you guys are tough graders, is what I'm.
We are tough graders. When we first did our report card in 2012, dams did have a lower grade. So we have made some progress through the 2018 bill, which gave some additional authority to the dam safety program. And there have been some temporary staff added that have kind of helped with their capacity kind of in that time period. So we have made some steps towards improvement, but are still at this.
So I guess, but how much of our C is a risk to the public versus, hello, legislators, we need to fund the program better?
Yeah, so I do have some more specifics on that with some really specific recommendations on what we can do. I understand that this is like a big
big
C. It
C.
doesn't make a lot of sense with what you can actually do to improve that. So some of the things that you'll see kind of at the beginning of our report are some overarching goals for infrastructure. And some of these really pertain more to your bill at the higher level of making sure that we're looking at resilience, making sure we have the workforce in place that we need to really have safe functioning infrastructure. So this is just in there as an idea of, you're on the right track. When we start to look at dams specifically, the chart here is looking at the use of the dams. And a lot of the uses of the dams are not known or don't have a specific use that they're being used for currently. So, you heard from a landowner that has hydroelectric dams. That's just one piece of the bigger puzzle of what these dams are used for. As you've heard from Dam Safety, there's over 1,000 in the state. Very few new dams. But what we have seen is there have been some removal of dams. We've seen 19 in the last 4 years. When dams don't have an active purpose like that, over 500 in the blue kind of row on the chart there, they are much more likely to deteriorate and become safety problems. Some landowners just don't have a reason to maintain their dams. They are not doing that. So removal is one way to kind of just remove the safety issue from the river system in the case where they aren't otherwise being used.
We go on.
So you heard a little bit about.
Just a quick question,
Yeah,
go on from that slide.
yeah.
Of the dams in the blue that are not active, or are they mostly low risk? Or some of them in the other two categories?
Yeah, it's a mix. And some of them just don't have an active use, but still are a higher hazard or significant hazard. So the use is not tied specifically to the hazard. So that hazard class is mixed kind of throughout the categories.
When you said that the ones that are not active are more likely to not be well maintained, my question then was, are most of those not being well maintained low risk, or are some of them also?
It is definitely a mix.
Okay.
So some of those are ones that have infrastructure down and homes downstream that could be damaged. So then looking a little closer at that hazard potential, like you can see, it's a real mix of hazard potentials throughout the inventory. 67 of which are in that high hazard category. So if they fail, the loss of life is probable. That's part of the definition, as well as the other damages to the environment and property. One of the things we've seen here is that that analysis of figuring out which hazard category a dam should be in has not been updated kind of throughout the dam's lifespan. So it's likely that some of the dams in the low or unclassified or unknown categories may be high. And it is one of the things that the new rules, kind of the phase 2 of the rules that Dam Safety has been kind of working towards would start to address by having kind of a reevaluation of that hazard classification, not just when the dam is built. In a lot of cases, this was over 100 years ago for some of these and maybe hasn't been reevaluated in that time period. So, you can kind of give the hazard potential a little bit of grain of salt because it's not a constantly reevaluated. Ownership. So I think one of my big points here is that contrary to a lot of our infrastructure, like roads or bridges, the people who own those roads and bridges are experts in that type of infrastructure and have a whole kind of system for taking care of it. Most dam owners are not dam experts. They bought property that has a dam on it. They are a town that has inherited a dam over time, and they are not experts. And I think in that way, it means that as a state, there's a little bit more responsibility to be kind of making sure that someone's following up on safety issues and enforcing the rules. There's also not funding available for dam owners.
GMP. Dylan's here.
We have to adjourn.
Nope, we don't. We're on the battery and we're still live, so we can keep going. That's what it is.
So, especially the owners that maybe just happen to get a dam over time, they don't have funding in place to maintain them. They typically don't have a program for maintenance, and they're not doing maintenance on a lot of these dams. And, that doesn't apply to typically to like a hydroelectric facility where they have an income associated with that dam and that use. This would be most of those other categories where, there just isn't a system in place for maintaining them and making repairs. So I know this is a lot up here. These are some of the bigger points, and I think the draft bill is actually addressing quite a few of these things. And, just generally wanted to make the point that there are a lot of dams in the inventory that are in poor condition, including some of the ones that are a high hazard potential dam. So it's not as though only the small, lower risk ones are in poor condition. So there is actually a risk here. With dams, they are aging. Most of them are in the average age is 80 years old. So, you can imagine a wall left out there in the woods and no one's maintaining it. It's going to start to fall apart over time. And that's essentially what a dam is. A dam is a wall across the river. And, there's a lot of different forces of erosion and weather and freeze thaw patterns that kind of eat away at it over time. So if maintenance isn't done, they do just really continue to degrade, creating more and more of a safety issue over time. So the dam safety program that we might have had 50 years ago is not adequate now that our dams are another 50 years older. So this is a problem that escalates over time, both with the deterioration due to age, but also with climate change and larger floods that we're seeing. So, the fact that there needs to be a bigger investment now makes sense just due to the type of infrastructure that this is. I mentioned what I called hazard creep. The idea that as we have more and more development in our state, some of that development is happening downstream of a dam. And then that dam hazard classification may or may not reflect that new kind of risk downstream. Emergency action plans. I know you have something in there about the committee to look at regional operation of emergency action plans. That seems like a good idea. The people in charge of emergency action planning now are dam owners, which typically don't have the expertise to do that. And let's see, rulemaking. We're very excited in the engineering community about the rulemaking. We think there's a lot of great things that have been talked about as part of that. And I have been keeping up and participating in that rulemaking process, which has been pretty neat through phase 1 and looking forward to phase 2. We've seen that.
Question from Representative Bongartz.
Yeah, go ahead.
We need the slides.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about the 8 poor condition high hazard dams. That's alarming.
Yeah.
And some of them are overseen by the department, some by FERC, and some by the PUC. Do you know which of those?
I
So
do
that's
not
okay, so
know
that's-
the breakdown of
okay.
who owns.
Then the second part of the question is, if whichever regulating agency has sort of authority over those, why do we have poor condition high hazard dams? Because you would think logically, we'd be going, before it got to poor condition, that something would have been forced on the owners. And
Yeah.
it hasn't happened because
So I think this next sentence here, enforcement is difficult under the current unsafe dam proceedings, I think is a big part of it. It's a difficult process to make someone fix something, especially when it's very, very expensive. So I do think that that's a big part of the problem, and also that there isn't kind of funding available for the state to be able to come in and say, okay, well, we're gonna help you stabilize this because it's a public safety issue and people are at risk. And so the loan program, I think, is something that could help address.
dams at the point, a high risk, it's gotten to the point of being in poor condition. Why would we be fixing it instead of eliminating it?
Why would we be fixing instead of eliminating?
Yeah,
I mean, I think eliminating it would be a great option, in my opinion. So eliminating a dam removes all of the risk. And it eliminates all future maintenance too. So you have a dam in place, there's always some level of risk with it, even if it's in good condition. You know, if you remove the dam, you're going back to a natural river system, which is not gonna fail, sending a flood wave downstream. So I do agree that, dam removal should always be part of the analysis and part of the thinking. There may be situations where that is not appropriate. I mean, some of our dams in the state are flood control dams or have some very important purpose that may make sense to continue to maintain over time. So I do think that it should be part of any analysis.
How do we find out about these 8 dams?
They are in the inventory.
You don't have them in your report.
I do not have them in my report, no. They're not specifically called out. We sorted everything and
Like this, we've had a similar number year over year now for a while. And that's a little disconcerting.
it seems like a lot of times dams will hover in their condition for a long time because it's expensive and there's frankly no one making somebody do something to fix it. So the enforcement, I think, is slow.
We know well if the power's out and that's what's causing
It
the
seems
problem.
like power's not out,
Yeah.
and I've sent a message to IT to try and get some.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't even notice it.
It's kind of like, yeah.
So this slide, so we published our report, the written report, and this is part of why I decided to put slides together instead of just giving you the report. We published it last winter, right before the summer flooding. So I just felt like it's important to acknowledge that we did have quite a bit of flooding this summer. I think that's a big impetus for why you're working on the bill. And that during that flooding, a lot of the safety needs related to dams were highlighted. You know, we had multiple dam failures. We had multiple damages related to dams where either dams washed out, causing like high velocities and erosion, or causing the sediment that was behind the dam to wash downstream and then smother people's properties or rivers. So I worked on multiple projects where we saw damage to these older dams. And I think that it's important that we have the resources in place to identify issues kind of prior to floods, kind of on an ongoing basis, like we were talking about, target those poor condition dams and come up with a solution for them before failure happens. And, I think it's also important to have the emergency repair funding in place so that when you do identify an issue or you have a flood where something needs to be stabilized, there is a system in place and funding available to do that emergency stabilization. This is a picture up here of a dam in East Calais where it had overtopped and washed out, and water's continuing to pipe through it, but there's been an emergency fix put in place so that it's currently stable until kind of the final design and engineering and permitting can be done to do a permanent fix at this location. So, that emergency funding is just an important piece here. I just wanted to say that the dam program is doing an amazing job, even though they don't have enough staff. They're very spread thin. They're not always able to get to their inspections at the schedule that they'd really like to. But with that, they really have prioritized safety and put staff into the tasks they need to be doing to get the core done. We really applaud the efficient efforts that they did in July. And a lot of the other kind of revamps of the program with inspections and inventory that have been great. And Our group actually every year honors one engineer who's done kind of a lifetime achievement award kind of a thing. And for the first time ever, we're actually honoring a group, and we've chosen the dam safety program to receive our annual award just because they went above and beyond this year with the flooding. And I think just have been doing a really good job of prioritizing what they need to. So a few recommendations. I have some red language here because I think that our recommendations were published in before the flooding and don't account for the things that are in your current bill. So we were already recommending with the current program to increase the staffing to 6 full-time, fully funded under, non-temporary funding, like permanent funded positions. And that does not include the new tasks in the bill, which looking at them would be significant. Probably needing double that, in the range of double. I don't know the exact number because I think it depends on your timeline, but you are going to need more people to, implement the things that are currently in the bill. We had also identified that it would be important to increase staff and training in the rivers program related to dam specific items. So that doesn't include the new river corridor tasks that you've included. We had already seen that there weren't enough river staff to do any kind of overlap with dams. We had made a note of the PUC really kind of aligning their work with DEC. So, the idea of transferring those dams under the DEC purview would meet that goal of ours. And then our other goals, quite a few of them would be addressed both with increased staffing of the dam safety program and the phase 2 of the rules. Which would address the updating the emergency action planning. It would address the hazard creep issue with increased development downstream of dams and get to kind of have the inspections happening on time. So I think with that, just making sure that you're both getting the staff and the financial resources to support those staff seems like really our only comment, other than just very much supporting what you have in the bill. And then we do have a link to the full report, which we have uploaded to your website as well. I can answer questions if you have any.
Thanks for your testimony. Is there anything you wish was in this bill, in its entirety, or in the dam section in particular?
I think it's good. I talked to Jared ahead of time. I think he's going to propose in the wetlands section. We do a lot of restoration projects around dam removals, and access through wetland areas has sometimes come up as an issue because the access might be considered separately than the project itself. So, potentially also including the exemption for access to a restoration project in the wetland part. Very much support the river corridor part. We've seen so many people's properties and just affected by erosion hazards. And, we just aren't consistently dealing with that on a statewide basis at this point. So I think that that's really great.
Have you seen a lot of newer, and I'll say, 20 to 30-year-old construction in river corridors that's been damaged or destroyed in the flooding?
Yeah, we have just around the state. It's often individual homes or driveways. But yes, people are continuing to build in river corridors, and it's unfortunate.
Thank you for your testimony. Do members have questions? Representative Torrey.
Just a quick one for you with your national hat on. How does the supply of civil engineers look nationally?
Not great. I think that goes back to our workforce challenges. And, one of our big overarching issues is that, there aren't as many people going into technical fields. I think a lot of people want to be a YouTube star and they're not becoming an engineer.
You could be both, right?
I think you can be both. My favorite YouTube stars are engineers. Actually, my only favorite YouTube stars.
A strong
No.
suspicion.
They're all engineers.
A lot of viewers too.
So it's a good question. I think we are in river engineering, we are seeing more people wanting to get into that field and more women, I think, which is pretty exciting, compared to maybe some other less exciting parts of engineering.
Representative Bongard.
Just to play out a little bit, we have these 1,000-something dams, 1,100, I think, the sunset. My sense is that a whole lot of them just really don't have any reason for being there. Does this bill do anything? I'm still getting familiar with the bill, and maybe you're not the right person to ask this, but are we doing anything about, does this bill actually help us get to the point of just getting rid of a few hundred dams?
Yeah,
For those that
So there's a few, what we've seen is, so I do specialize in dam removal more than repair. I do repair too, but removal is really my specialty. So what we're seeing is something that was really exciting out of the 2018 bill update is that the annual fees that got put into place have notified landowners that first off, they own a dam. A lot of people didn't even realize that they did. And it's provided some financial incentive for them to say, why am I paying this every year? This dam's a problem and mosquito-y and, my kids might fall off of it and get hurt. And, so it kind of puts the idea in someone's head that maybe there's something they could do to get out of the fee. So I think that that's one thing that I've seen. I do think that it's easy to ignore a notice that says your dam's in poor condition if there's nobody following up on it. So I think that that's something that could be improved. I would not want to see the emergency funding and loans go to Band-Aid fixes on dams that could otherwise be removed in the long run. But I do think that an emergency stabilization is important in the short term, no matter what the ultimate fate of a dam is. But having that analysis of ultimately should it be fixed or ultimately should it be removed, I think could move people towards the removal alternative, rather than a very expensive repair. Repairs do tend to be expensive.
Representative Smith.
Thank you. These dams that are not much good for anything right now, are they used for recreation, like canoeing or boating or fishing for kids or anything like that?
Some are. I mean, there's a whole mix of uses. We'll see a dam and someone might say, I'm 70 now. When I was a kid, I used to boat. I used to fish and canoe, but it's all filled up with sediment now and I don't see the fish. And
I know that feeling real well.
yeah, I hear that a lot, from someone who said, I used to do this in my dam or in my
Would it be worth it to get rid of a dam for the sake of the recreation of it? Or
Keep it? Do you mean keep it for the sake of recreation?
to keep it for this, yeah.
Someone wants to pay
I
for it.
think there's some cases where that might make sense, especially if it's maybe a state resource.
In River Reservoir.
And thousands of people in the state use it. Maybe that's one to stay.
Yeah.
But if it's in someone's backyard and people don't have access and it's mostly full of sediment and
Sure.
Still kind of,
Yeah.
are we live still or no?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
We'll watch a while.
it says I'm sharing still. So
Yeah, you're not, but that's okay. We're finished with the slides. Do members have further questions?
I don't know if this is the right.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Representative Sibilia.
Well, I'm actually looking at the auditor's report and seeing the high hazards that are in poor condition and a few that are state-owned in my neck of the woods. And that's DEC. The reports on each of them, so that. Do you have any recommendations for us on those? And I think
I have read the auditor's report and I have seen the list. I have not personally worked on any of those dams or visited them in the capacity of like, so I don't have specific recommendations other than I think a lot of the things you have in the bill would move in the right direction of pushing landowners to get their dams out of poor condition.
so if the landowner or if the dam owner is the state already and it's in poor condition and it's high hazard, is the bill gonna help us there? Okay.
I think that
You were here yesterday.
the funding piece could,
Excuse me,
the funding piece.
will help. Yes. Yep.
Mm.
Their attorney's here right now.
DEC's attorney is here.
Yeah.
Good. Can we talk to them?
Sorry, what was the question?
And well, there's a question about the number of state-owned high hazard poor condition dams and what the state's doing about them.
Oh. This is Hannah Smith for the record. I am afraid that that would be a question for Ben. In terms of activities, I do know.
Yeah.
As Jessica said, that they prioritize dams as they do inspections every year. They do have obviously like a running list of everything that's due for inspection. But then the way that they prioritize repairs, I think, is a question that Ben would have to answer.
He had a slide in his presentation yesterday that addressed this, like with kind of a list of current projects and dollar amounts and some photos on it. So, I mean, they are prioritizing.
And we can, DEC can provide feedback on specific projects that are in the docket that have been funded. We often have to then contract with the engineers that will do the work, so we have to move through the contracting process as well. But we can provide the committee with more information. That would be helpful.
That would be very helpful. The representative Sibilia.
And so in the auditor's report, one of these is called out as, questions about whether or not the reports that are being done on the dam are going anywhere.
Yeah.
And so if they don't go anywhere, no one can be held liable, I think is what. So. Yes.
Identify the state-owned.
File pounds there. So I know there's been talk of actually filing those reports in the town record. Am I off with that? Having the inspection reports go into the town.
I think we'll follow up with Ben Green. This is not your area of professional expertise. Representative Stebbins.
It's not sure. I remember working on 2 pieces of plywood in a cranberry bog dam, and we had to compile so many different grants to go through the process of removing it. This is through the Massachusetts Department of Fish and Game. And then we also looked at the Neponset River, Lower Mill Dam, which had lots of PCB sediment in it. And it's just so much money to remove dams properly. Could you give a sense of the range of your experience, what you've seen? Because to remove various size dams.
Yeah, I mean, there's a pretty large range and I think there's other people in the room that deal with that as well. What I have seen is it's always been less than the repair cost. you know, when because we a lot of times do feasibility analyses, we'll look at a dam, maybe for a town, and they have questions about what to do. So we will look at its condition, and estimate how much money it would cost to repair that dam, as well as the alternative of removing it. And in all cases that we've had, the removal has been less cost than to fix the dam to get it up to the current standards. So dams come in all sizes. So, I mean, it could be, you know, $50,000 for a tiny dam or $1 million for a big, I mean, it could be a very wide range depending on the conditions. So.
Thanks.
All right, thanks for your testimony and for your patience as we were delayed. Do we still need a break to get the TV started?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to take a technology break. It will be as short as necessary to get us fully back up and running. So take a brief recess.